We have breaking news just into CNN. The Russians now accusing Ukraine of trying to assassinate President Putin. The Kremlin says in a new statement that 2 Ukrainian drones were flown towards the Kremlin last night. The press service released a statement moments ago. I want to read it to you now. They say, quote, "We regard these actions as a planned terrorist act and an attempt on the president's life." It also says Russia reserves the right to take retaliatory measures where and when it sees fit. I should note, they say Putin was not in the Kremlin at the time that this was happening. I want to go to CNN's Nick Robertson, who is live in eastern Ukraine with this breaking news. Nick, what are we learning about this? And I do want to note, this is coming from the Kremlin. If you take everything they say with a grain of salt, of course, we've asked the White House, we've asked the Pentagon for comment. What have you learned about this, Nick?
Yeah, it really has to be taken with a lot of concern and treated with the fact that we know that the Kremlin often lies about the situation. But what we know is what the Kremlin tells their population often sticks with the population, that Russians will often, most often, believe what they're being told by the Kremlin. And that's another reason to take this seriously, because is this an effort by Putin to try to find some way to escalate or, again, justify his war in Ukraine? What do we know at the moment? We know that state media reported that 2 Ukrainian UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, were flown towards the Kremlin, that they were intercepted, disabled, that the debris that fell from them didn't cause any injuries inside the Kremlin. After that, the Kremlin then said this was an attack, an attempt on President Putin's life. However, as you said, we know that Putin wasn't there inside the Kremlin at the time. There are social media videos of what purports to be this incident, but again, this requires absolute scrutiny, and CNN at this time cannot verify. Eyewitnesses about the time that this event is allegedly supposed to have taken place do report hearing at least one loud clap or small explosion in the area. But at the moment, Ukrainians haven't said anything officially about it. But it is clear that for Ukraine, this would be a concern about how Russia will respond and use this information that they're putting out in the population. What more do we know about these drones? We do know that Ukraine does have longer distance drones than it did in the past. They threaten to attack the Kremlin in this way. They haven't. We need to pay very close attention to this close scrutiny of this video and the events surrounding it.
And it is important to note that we have seen Russia allege things in the past and try to use them to justify its own actions. That is important here. But you said, Nick, we have not heard anything from the Ukrainian side yet on this?
Correct. False flag operations have been the modus operandi, the playbook of the Kremlin. Absolutely, they want to do this sort of thing to use it as propaganda, as they have in the past, for events that are yet to unfold. We know that Russia is concerned about a potential Ukrainian counteroffensive. We know that that Russians are losing troops at the front line in high numbers. The front lines, speaking with troops who fight in those front lines today, and you know, they talk about the intensity of the fight, the expectations and the training they get for the battle ahead of them. So the expectation on the ground all along the front lines in Ukraine is that the fighting here is going to heat up. What we have also seen in recent days, and I think this is very significant and very important, is we've seen 2 Russian trains just inside Russia, outside over the border from Ukraine, inside Russia, struck earlier this week. We've seen oil depots struck deep in Russia's south, not inside Ukraine. So it appears as if Russia is getting targeted inside Russia, not clear by whom, on vital supply lines, the train links, and fuel stores. So is the tempo of activity over the border inside Russia heating up? Who is perpetrating it? We don't know. The events over the Kremlin, Russian propaganda, or real events? It's unclear at the moment.
Nick Robertson, if you do hear anything, please keep us updated.
Let's bring in retired Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. He is the former European Affairs Director at the National Security Council. You served as the Trump administration's top Ukraine expert. You are the perfect voice to have on this breaking news that you just heard reported from our Nick Robertson. How would you expect this, even if it is Russian propaganda, how would you expect this to cause Russia to act toward Ukraine? What would retaliation look like, and how would you be advising the administration if you were still doing that?
Sure. So the first thing is we could set aside that one possibility is that this is a pretext for the Russians to target Zelensky, as they have periodically throughout this war, especially early on, for assassination. So it's a pretext saying that this is a response to a Ukrainian attack. More than likely, this is probably a shaping operation. We've seen these long-range attacks. The Ukrainians have indigenized a long-range unmanned combat aerial vehicle capability and have struck out against targets on the Russian side of the border deep into Ukraine. This is a demonstration of capability, hundreds of kilometers, 600 plus kilometers to Moscow, and they went after what's probably a strategic messaging target, which is the Kremlin itself, that the Kremlin is vulnerable, that they were able to launch UAVs that got that close to the Kremlin or potentially towards the Kremlin. The media videos that are on media show fire burning on one of the chapels in the Kremlin itself. That's a pretty powerful demonstration and something intended to send a signal to the Russians that they are no longer safe at home either. And as the Ukrainians start to land blows in this counteroffensive in the coming weeks and months, this is also going to show that there's a cost directly to the Russian population. So I think it's probably part of a shaping operation more than likely rather than pretext, but it could be a pretext also.
And it also speaks to what Nick reported there at the end of his report, that Russia is getting targeted inside Russia, deeper inside Russia, unclear by whom.
That's definitely, I mean, it's pretty clear. The thing is that the Ukrainians have gone to a policy, kind of an Israeli policy, of non-attribution or not taking credit for these attacks. But in fact, it's pretty clear logically who's conducting these attacks. It's the Ukrainian armed forces attempting to set conditions to liberate their territory, free their people from Russian occupation. And I mean, these are kind of minor events that are unfolding in a precursor to a major strikes by Ukrainian armed forces that'll achieve broad effects, I think. I mean, we're not going to see the war end in the next 5-6 months, but the Ukrainians are going to achieve some major gains. I'm not a skeptic here. I believe what I see with my eyes, that the Ukrainians have demonstrated a capability to liberate territory. They're going to do that, and they're going to put enormous pressure on Vladimir Putin to either put up or shut up. Put up meaning he's going to have to do another mobilization, pulling in hundreds of thousands of troops, or start to put his toes into negotiation, which is the more likely course of action.
Obviously, we take everything Russia says with a grain of salt, given how much they lie. But do you think that there is a real chance here that this is what Ukraine was trying to do, that it was an attempt on Putin's life?
I don't think it's an attempt on Putin's life. The fact is that the Ukrainians, probably better than anybody else, know the patterns of life for Vladimir Putin. It's pretty evident when he's in the Kremlin. There are massive motorcades that kind of lock up the city of Moscow when he's traveling there. So they were pretty confident that he wasn't going to be in the Kremlin, and it was more of again, a strategic strike on the kind of the heart of Russia's power, the Kremlin itself, with a demonstration that even that location is not safe. So it's unlikely that it's an assassination, more than likely just a demonstration of capability and cost.
Can we also ask you about President Zelensky in this interview with the Washington Post yesterday, saying, you just said that you do believe Ukraine will be able to make significant territorial gains in this spring offensive. There were documents that were leaked online that the White House has disputed how authentic they are. I said some of them may be doctored, but they seem to say that actually behind closed doors, there is skepticism in the administration of what Ukraine will actually be able to achieve when it comes to retaking land. What do you make of the fact that they haven't spoken to Zelensky about that leak?
So let's start with the premise that our analysis has been consistently wrong and underestimated Ukrainian power and overestimated Russian power. So half of that analysis in those leaked reports is inaccurate. It's just a fact. So in terms of the kind of raw damage from these leaks, it's quite minimal. The bigger damage comes from the fact that we've continued to undermine our standing with these leaks. Our other allies are going to be dubious about sharing information with us. This in part validates the fact that the Ukrainians were very reluctant to share information and intelligence with the U.S. Throughout this war, especially early on. They started getting a level of confidence. President Zelensky in particular has some scar tissue. Trump released a transcript that was embarrassing to Zelensky, That is really not the way we're supposed to interact with our allies and partners. But the problem is that there are different tiers of relationships, and it's not just Ukraine. We would never allow something like this to occur with Russia or China, where there's a potential leak that's damaging to the relationship. And even though they're adversaries, we would probably talk to them. But lesser powers, unfortunately, don't get the same kind of consideration. So Zelensky's already skeptical. We need to do better about coordinating with our allies. We need to treat them accordingly, especially now that Ukraine has demonstrated itself as probably the most important partner in that part of the world. And hopefully we learn from this mistake and start to be a little bit more thoughtful and not discount the Ukrainians so much.
Yeah, we heard Zelensky tell the Washington Post, we did not have that information. It's definitely a bad story. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman.